If there's one term that comes up a lot in anime criticism that I think gets really abused and misunderstood, it's budget. People tend to talk about budget in animation like budget directly corresponds to the fluidity and quality of every frame in a show. Like anime is some kind of fucking like candy dispenser where the more quarters you put in, the more candy you get. And that's just not the way anime is. Animation, is an art form. And like any art form, what really determines its quality more than anything is the skill of the people putting it together, the craftsmanship. Budget is important for obvious reasons. How many people you can hire, how much you can put into your show, all of that, is going to be partly controlled by budget. But budget does not equal quality. It's not like a 1-1 thing. It's not like you plug more money in, therefore it gets better looking. A lot of the time when anime has big, amazing looking moments, it's not because they had more budget for that episode or that they allocated their budget in one place. It's because they brought on someone who was talented to do that scene. What a lot of people might not understand about anime and the way that it's made is that in Japanese animation, the key frames, the main frames of movement are in a scene are all drawn by one person. So let's say there's this big 1-minute fight scene in the middle of an episode. Typically, that means one guy, one girl, one key animator sat there and animated this whole scene themselves. It's then passed off to people who color it in, people who add the rest of the design features. They just draw, the black and white, the motion that's happening in whatever their particular style is, and they draw this whole scene. Someone else fills in the in-between, someone else fills in this and that. And when you get these big, intense action scenes, it's usually because someone who's really talented at doing action scenes was given that scene. So let's say you have an episode and there's 20 animators working on it, and they have to assign each of these animators a certain number of scenes. Maybe this isn't enough animators to finish the episode, so they hire other studios. They hire animators outside the studio to do certain parts. But they have this one action scene, and they say, we're going to give this scene to this animator who we know is going to do the best work. It's not necessarily that this animator gets paid more, or that they're worth more in terms of what they demand. I mean, that's possible. Maybe having a higher budget means you can hire more of these highly talented, sometimes legendary animators. And yeah, animation budget could be important for that, but it's not as though the fact that there's not a whole ton of great animation is the result of we didn't have enough money to hire enough great animators. It's more like maybe there's not enough to go around. Maybe not enough animators wanted to take that job. Maybe they couldn't find the right person for that job, or they wanted this one person but they couldn't get them. Maybe it's because the people they hired just weren't very good and they didn't have time to change it. Most of the problems with anime production really come from scheduling issues. They come from the fact that these companies try to make this shit down to the wire. There's often times where they're still working on the episode the week that episode comes out. Sometimes the day that episode comes out. Sometimes 5 minutes before that episode comes out. These are the kind of issues that really push things to the grindstone, where it's like, it's not that they didn't have the money to get this done on time, it's that they didn't schedule it very well, or someone fucked up somewhere in the production. Someone was not talented enough at their job, and that's where things fell apart. Because remember, talent is not just who can draw well, it's are your organizers on point? Are the people who are making sure that everyone's working, are they doing a good job? Is your studio well organized? Is your schedule well drawn out? Now, what brought me onto this topic is that there was a tweet the other day from a Japanese animator that I found translated on 4chan. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of sources for this kind of shit because there's not a lot of sources like this in English. I can't read Japanese, and rather than go on a month-long research project for this, I decided I would just rant about it for now. And maybe I'll touch on this in a later analysis at some point. Maybe I'll go into this really in depth with more sources if I can find them in the future. But this tweet was from an animator who was saying that they thought it was odd that Kyoto Animation is always said to have high budgets with their work. And they said Kyoto Animation typically has modest budgets. They're the same as any other studio. Their budgets are no higher than the average studio's budget. So what makes this interesting, of course, is that Kyoto Animation shows are gorgeous, almost always. They've been pushing the medium forward for years now. Any Kyoto Animation show is probably the best looking show on TV at the time that it aired. Right now, they're running Hibike Euphonium. Looks better than virtually anything else on television at the moment. So, why is that possible if they don't have higher budgets? Well, Kyoto Animation are known for taking extremely good care of their animators, for the fact that they're a very tight-knit studio. Kyoto Animation is stationed outside Kyoto. They're in one of the nearby cities. Most anime studios are in Tokyo. Most of the anime talent is in Tokyo. Kyoto Animation out here in Kyoto have this very small group of people who pretty much work on every show. Like, the Kyoto Animation staff is very consistent. You see the same directors, same creative staff, same people working on all of their stuff for the most part. And they don't outsource a lot of their stuff. They don't hire other studios to handle parts. They don't give it off completely to other countries and shit like that, like other studios tend to do. They don't take on more than one show at a time, usually. I believe I looked at this the other day, and there was not a single period of time where Kyoto Animation had 2 main series coming out. I think they may have had Haruhi Season 2 aired at the same time as something else, and they have movies that come out, but they always work on just one TV show. Compare this to, like, A1 Pictures, who has 4 or 5 shows on at any given time, in addition to several movies. And A1 Pictures is known for outsourcing tons of their work, hiring contractors for most of their work. Their staff is completely different on every show. There's no concrete feeling of an A1 Pictures show. The directors are always different, the animators are always different. When they put out something that's actually worthwhile, it's usually because they brought in some great director who's not typically working for their studio. So you have Kyoto Animation, this small group of very talented people who are really good at their job. They have a lot of time to work on their animation because they don't have to work on multiple shows at once. They tend to pick jobs that they want to do. For instance, Hibike Euphonium is a novel adaptation. And the original novel, the director of the show, I think maybe the producer, president of Kyoto Animation, whoever it was, he went to the store and bought this book and read it, and because the book took place in Kyoto, and because he felt like it was the kind of story that works really well with Kyoto Animation, he was like, we should definitely acquire the rights to this and make an anime adaptation. And it just so happened that the publishing company was thinking the same thing. So they got the rights to this show. They own the anime rights to Hibike Euphonium, and they can make it their own way, and they can do as they please with it. So it's a passion project for them. It's a show about their town. It's with their talent. They have the breathing room to do it. They have the right people on it. They have this seasoned director who's done almost everything by Kyoto Animation, being either assisted or the real director. I'm not entirely sure how the direction on this show works, but Yamada Naoko, who did K-On! And Tamako Market, is also in a sort of directorial position. So basically both of the 2 directors from Kyoto Animation, the 2 directors who've done the most of their work, are both working on this. So we've got this tight-knit team of people who know what they're doing, and they can bring the techniques that they've used on other shows. They can use all the digital post-processing techniques that they've learned from other, from their films and stuff. Where this film, or this show, borrows a lot of stuff from Tamako Market, which Tamako, the film version, Tamako Love Story, I mean. Tamako Love Story is considered somewhat revolutionary in the way it uses, like, camera work and film techniques in ways that most anime don't do. Lots of depth of field cinematography where certain elements are out of focus or in focus, use of chromatic aberration and all this other stuff, and they're bringing that stuff to this show, and it makes it look really cinematic and engaging visually in ways that most anime isn't. And it's not that that costs more money to do, it's that they have the vision and the talent to do that. You know, like I said, it's an art form, and to suggest that budget is what controls what makes anime look good or bad really ignores the fact that it's an art form. It's like if you said that my videos are only good because I have the nicest microphone around. You know, like that's it. I bought a nice microphone, therefore I make the best videos, you know. because that's the only real cost thing. Or this camera, I don't do a lot of vlogs, but if you think, oh, he's got a nice camera, he's got a nice microphone, that's all that matters. Whereas someone like Mr. Beatung, who's my favorite YouTube analyst, video game analyst, if you don't know Mr. Beatung, check him out. He's fantastic, but he has a shit microphone, usually really bad production quality on his videos, but the writing is so fantastic that it trumps anything else that I've seen on YouTube. So this is, it's talent, it's not just the money, and his videos would be considered something like low budget. But I'm not sure that entirely makes my point about anime looking good, because I just said that he obviously hasn't spent the money on making his equipment better. That's why his show might not be on the production quality of mine, but the overall quality is better. And my point about anime is that the art of what they're doing comes through talent. And there's also the idea that a lot of the time when people say, oh, the budget ran out, they're ignoring the fact that anime sometimes deliberately tries to look different. For instance, great examples, episodes 4 of Kill la Kill and Gurren Lagann. Both of them were infamous for looking very different from the rest of the show. But the reason they look that way isn't because of a budget fluctuation, it's because of the director, Hiroyuki Imaishi, bringing in different character designers and episode directors and animation directors to work on those episodes, because Hiroyuki Imaishi has said in the past that what he loved about old anime that he thinks hasn't really survived much into modern anime is that in older shows you could really tell who animated what segments, because everyone had their own style and they really brought that to the table. And with digital animation there was a lot more homogeny, a lot more trying to make all the characters always on model all the time, trying to make every shot look the same, and he wanted to make his shows change, and you could really feel the personalities of each individual animator who was working on the show. So he has whole episodes in some of his shows where he brings in someone else and has them use their style, like on Gurren Lagann episode 4, which is extremely limited animation. Limited animation is a style where you deliberately have fewer frames and more extreme movement between the frames, which Hiroyuki Imaishi also utilizes sometimes. In fact, a lot. He tends to have his characters dash across screen in these really violent, frantic motions, and when he does it, it looks really cool. Nonetheless, it can be done in all sorts of different ways, and so Gurren Lagann episode 4 uses a lot of limited animation. Does it look good? I don't personally think it looks great. I know a lot of people don't like the look of it, but it wasn't because it was low budget. It was because of the stylistic decision that the director wanted to make. And I'm sure that's probably the case for Kill la Kill episode 4 as well, because it looks really different. Not just in terms of it's less fluid, like the character designs look completely different for that episode. That can't be a mistake. There's no way that it was just, oh, for this episode everything's gonna look totally different, because whatever, we don't have any money. If they didn't have any money, they'd just use stills, or if they didn't have the time. Studio Shaft is infamous, historically, for the fact that their shows are usually unfinished or full of stills, but they're also known for the fact that they correct everything on the Blu-rays, or the DVDs, back before Blu-rays. And if it was a lack of money, then this wouldn't be an issue, right? Like, they wouldn't be able to fix it on the DVDs because they didn't have the money to produce that. The reason their shows were always unfinished is because they went down to the wire. They were always understaffed. They didn't have enough people. They worked on too much shit, and they didn't finish it fast enough. They're terribly organized. So they'd work on these shows right down to the wire. In Bakemonogatari, where infamously they have whole sections of episodes, I think 7 and 8 or something, 6 and 7, somewhere around there, whole stretches of episode where there's just like nothing there. That's because the animation wasn't finished. When you watch that part on the Blu-ray, it's some of the best animation in the show. Like, one of the coolest fucking fight scenes in the show was completely not on the TV broadcast, because they didn't finish it in time. It wasn't that they didn't have the money, they just weren't done. And when things look janky, it's usually because they gave it to someone else. With Psychopaths, episodes, 17 and 18, the TV broadcast looked terrible. And the reason for that is that the director, at the time, after working on episode 16, he said that him and his staff were sort of mentally and physically at the end of their rope. They were like, they'd been working too hard on the show, they needed a break. So he took those 2 episodes and he contracted another studio to do them while him and his team took a break, So for 2 weeks, they took a break, some other studio made those episodes, and then they came back to work on the rest of the show. And those episodes looked like garbage because the other studio wasn't as good as Production IG, because Production IG has all the fucking talent. I don't know who they gave it off to, but Production IG is fantastic. They've always been fantastic. They have the best people. When you watch Neon Genesis Evangelion and End of Evangelion, what a lot of people forget about those shows, because everyone attributes them to Gainax, and everyone attributes the fact that Neon Genesis kind of turns into a clusterfuck towards the end to the fact that they ran out of money, which may be true, because they did have this changing time slot and everything, but people act like the changing time slot resulted in a slashed budget and stuff, and like everything fell apart. I think it's more likely that the changing time zone led to them having a more fucked up production schedule and everything falling apart towards the end. I'm not saying budget wasn't a part of it, but I think it was more than that. It wasn't just that they ran out of money. And Production IG also worked on Evangelion, and they did a lot of the best stuff in Evangelion. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure some of the animators, like, I don't know about Mitsuo Iso, if he was a Production IG or a Gainax guy, or if he was just contracted in, who did the famous Asuka fight from the film. He did the helicopter crashing in episode 1. He did some of the best animation cuts in the show. So just a lot of like really big name animators worked on Eva, and a lot of those guys mostly worked on Production IG shows. They were people who were frequent, or films, works of Production IG. So was it that Gainax had no money towards the end of the show, or was it that they didn't have Production IG for every episode? Was it that those animators only worked on certain episodes, were only contracted to certain episodes? In other words, did Eva only look good sometimes because sometimes they had good people working on it? Or was it a money issue? You know, that's an interesting question, but when you write into a review, oh, and then they ran out of money, it completely ignores all the complexity of what could have happened. And again, with going back to Shaft, they fix everything on the Blu-rays, so clearly they had the money. You know, clearly they eventually were able to do it. They eventually got the animator had the time at some point, and they fixed it before the DVD came out. And I mean, there's no way to say like whether, because you might think, oh, well, the show sold well, so of course they fixed it then, but you don't know if the show sold well. It's not out on DVD yet, and anime makes a lot of its money through sales. It's not through audience. It's not like most Western TV or even Western cartoons, where it's how many people watch it is really what matters. That doesn't happen with anime unless it's Noe Tamina, and even then it's gone downhill over the years, where Noe Tamina was the only animation block, which it's a TV programming block, where like the amount of ratings was like really significant, and because those weren't aimed at otaku, they were aimed at more contemporary audiences, whereas otaku stuff mostly relies on sales figures. It's like maybe only 100 people watch this on TV, but if all 100 people buy a Blu-ray, we might be okay. Really, it would be more like 2,000. And that, by the way, is the figure. The 2,000 Blu-rays sold is considered the line between success and failure for most shows. That's the Manabi line, where Gakuen Utopia Manabi Straight sold 2,000 copies, and that was like just enough to make back the money spent on the show. So, and not a lot of shows necessarily make that. But again, budget, it matters. It is a factor. But when you attribute it to these things, you ignore all the artistry. You ignore all the fact that people worked on this, not money. Money did not make the show. People made the show. Just because something looked bad for a second in a show and people are like, oh, the budget for Walk animation ran out. I saw this comment recently. Someone said the Walk animation budget ran out. And I was like, you really think there's a Walk animation budget? Or that they were running up against their time limit on making this episode, and they hired some out-of-studio contractor to do this part. Like when a shitty thing happens at a Studio Bones show, and it's like, how is this possible? Well, probably it wasn't Bones who animated it, because that wouldn't happen, you know? So, yeah, just I want people to think about this and stop using the word budget in reviews. Stop, oh, the budget sometimes was high and sometimes it was low. You don't fucking know. You don't know the budget. You don't know if it was that. You don't know if it was production desk. You don't know if it was animators. You don't know shit. So stop talking about the budget and just say sometimes the animation quality was good, sometimes it wasn't. I don't know what caused it, but sometimes that was the case. Anyways, I hope this was informative or helpful and that people will do things that I want them to do. So, have a nice day.